CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of CTV National News. Donald Trump signed an executive order authorizing sweeping new global tariffs, at least 10% on pretty much everything coming into the United States. But how Canada's affected is unclear. Whether we're affected is unclear. But he did confirm a 25% tariff on the auto industry, and that will go into effect at 12:01 a.m. Thursday. Now, here's a snippet of what the U.S. president said from the Rose Garden.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
All right, well, CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon was listening to the U.S. president along with us. And Joy, Trump called this the start of the golden age of America. He said they do it to us, we do it to them. And then he showed a graph with countries on it. So who's affected and how will it work?
Sandy, the president is using a sledgehammer. These reciprocal tariffs, like you said, they charge us, we charge them. And he was using this chart that was tailored to about 60 countries. So like you said, every country faces a baseline tariff of 10%. But I'm not sure how they came up with the numbers. But China, for instance, will face a 44% tariff. The European Union that Trump says rips off America, one of America's most important trading partners, will face a 20% tariff. Trump says that they plan to blanket the airwaves, making their case for these tariffs, insisting that this short-term pain that consumers here and just about every nation around the world will feel, that it will be worth it in the long run. Take a listen to what the president said.
We will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that.
Okay, so Joy, there's a little bit of confusion on our end. I didn't see Canada on that graphic, on that list. Did you?
No, I was squinting at that chart, and in the briefing room they've put out about 4 new charts, but I didn't see Canada on that list. So does that mean that we're hit with that 10% baseline tariff, or are we exempted? It's very unclear. Trump did take a shot, though, at Canada's dairy subsidies and said that free trade and the North American free trade deal between Canada and Mexico was wrong. But there's a huge amount of uncertainty, and this is a big economic and political gamble for this president, who is intent on trying to bring jobs and manufacturing back to America, even if it hurts.
All right, Joy, thank you for this. Now let's see if we can get some clarity from Ottawa. Mark Carney returned to Ottawa to act as Prime Minister today because of this situation. And Ottawa is where we find CTV's Judy Trin. So, Judy, any reaction from the Prime Minister's office? Are they clear on what's happening?
I can tell you, Sandy, as of 15, 20 minutes ago, they were still parsing through these documents. So these are official White House documents. And what I can tell you is that many countries are named on this, from Sri Lanka to the UK to Germany to South Korea, but not Canada and Mexico. Now, what this appears, and this is very early right now, but what it appears is that Canada and the U.S., Canada and Mexico may be exempt from this latest round of 10% baseline tariffs. We are waiting for confirmation from the Prime Minister's office. Mark Carney is expected to step out from a cabinet meeting, and he is going to address reporters with a statement, but he will not take questions. That will happen tomorrow after he meets with the premiers virtually. Now, take a listen to Premier Doug Ford. He says it is good news that Canada is not on this list, not on the boards that you mentioned, not on in these documents, but it's not a given that we're free and clear for now. Take a listen.
The positive thing that I saw was we weren't on that list. We weren't on page 1, we weren't on page 2, we weren't on page 3, and ourselves and Mexico. So we're going to stay tuned. Let's hope that there's some positive news coming.
Yeah, so Judy, the Prime Minister was definitely then not briefed on today's plans.
That's right. We were told to anticipate the fact that Donald Trump likes the element of surprise. He likes confusion. He uses it as a negotiating tactic, and this appears to be once again the case. This is causing some uncertainty. It's causing confusion. So we will get a better sense of exactly what Canada will face and what Canada will do in response to this from Mark Carney at around 5:45. That's the time he's tracking for, 5:45 Eastern.
Okay, Judy, thanks so much. We'll check back in with you. All right, now Donald Trump has been promising tariffs since he won the election last year, but it's been a winding and worrying path. Let's go over some of what happened. February the 1st, Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canadian products, but 2 days later, this was delayed for a month, with Canada promising to reinforce the border. Then on March the 4th, 25% tariffs went into effect, and Canada retaliated. But a day later, Trump gave the auto sector a 1-month exemption and then suspended the tariffs on items covered by the free trade agreement. On March the 12th, take a deep breath, U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs came into effect. So as for those reciprocal tariffs, such confusion, BNN Bloomberg's Amanda Lang is standing by. Okay, multiple reports, Amanda, that Canada is exempt from these reciprocal tariffs. Was that your read of what Donald Trump said today?
I would be reluctant to use the word exempt because that implies there's an official policy in place. I think it's more likely that we are going to be treated separately, as we have been and as we should be. We have a free trade agreement with this country, and that is a legal contract. The thing I think is important to remember here, Sandy, and that will upset markets and investors who are looking for some clarity, are that the numbers that the Trump administration is using for other countries are also kind of made up, if I can be bold about that. You know, they're saying these are non-tariff barriers in some cases, and they've analyzed the value of those. And in the case of Vietnam, it adds up to 90%, or the EU, it adds up to 60+%. That is not any math that anybody else will agree with. So we will immediately cue a big fight with those countries at the World Trade Organization, because this is, you know, crossing the line of what we would consider to be good behavior in trade. Canada got a reprieve. Are we completely out of the woods? I would be reluctant to hang anything too heavy on that hope.
Okay, we hold on that word reprieve. Judy alluded to this. Talk to us about the USMCA agreement. Does it still stand then?
Absolutely. Until we have a new one. Of course, it can be it can be unilaterally abused, as we've seen. It is currently being abused. Interestingly, in a symbolic vote, because it doesn't carry any more weight than that, as you know, in the Senate today, a bipartisan bill will pass that knocks down the security law that Trump is using to justify the tariffs against Canada. So inside his own country, there's dissent about it. This is likely now going to be seen as part of a broader negotiation around things that they don't like in our trade agreement. They've already named them. They don't like our supply management. They don't like our digital services tax. They don't like some other things, and that will be on the table for negotiations. But Sandy, the trouble is businesses need to know what they're doing tomorrow and next week and next month.
Right.
And today, we didn't get the clarity we hoped for.
All right, Amanda, thank you for this.
Thanks.
So Donald Trump did confirm, we got clarity on this, that the auto sector will be hit with 25% tariffs on finished cars. Now, as for the parts portion, the auto parts portion, that could be delayed by about a month. CTV's Heather Wright is in Oshawa, home to the General Motors assembly plant in Ontario. And Heather, any reaction to the announcement today? What are people saying? What are workers telling you?
Well, we haven't actually been able to speak to any workers because they are in the middle of their shift. We spoke with them a little earlier this afternoon, asking them about those tariffs as they were coming and going, but they were all expressing a great deal of anxiety, as many people just in Canada have been, but especially in the auto industry, because we know how interconnected the Canadian, American, and Mexican auto industries are. Here is what U.S. President Donald Trump had to say about those 25% tariffs earlier that will apply to cars made here in Canada.
But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
And remind us, Heather, how Canada's auto industry is going to be affected in broad strokes by this.
Well, that's still something that we're getting clarity on, Sandy. I have heard from industry experts that there is going to be a carve-out for compliant parts and vehicles as part of the USMCA, the CUSMA, that free trade deal. Now, that really only is to buy some time so that border agents and Border Patrol can figure out how to tariff those parts of the car. The proposal is that only parts not made in the U.S. would be tariffed. So this is all part of this confusion with today's announcement, but that's what we're hearing for now. There is going to be that carve-out so they can figure out how to tariff those cars, but that's only a slight reprieve with more news to drop, so to speak, in the coming weeks.
For sure. Okay, Heather, thank you. Now, as autos are to Ontario, aluminum is to Quebec. Quebec is North America's biggest producer of aluminum, and the industry, along with steel, already hit with a 25% tariff. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is standing by in Saguenay. And Geneviève, you know, we were trying to get clarity today on whether there'd be reciprocal tariffs, so tariffs, a stacking tariff on tariff, but we don't know yet. So still, we're going to be talking about the 25% tariffs that communities like Saguenay are dealing with, and how are they holding up?
Well, indeed, and they were very particularly concerned today with the fact that there could be more layers to what's happening here. Now, some of the small and medium-sized businesses connected to the aluminum industry have been hit already very hard by those 25% tariffs. There have been layoffs, there have been shifts cut. The bigger industries, the smelters, like here in the Saguenay region, there are 4 smelters and 1 refinery. They haven't had the same impact at the moment. They're still dealing, of course, with the 25% tariffs, but it's been a bit of a different industry. They've been holding steady for now, as workers were telling us today. But they were holding their breath as to what happened if there were more tariffs. They're also talking about the fact that even if there are no other tariffs, and of course, there's still so much confusion. Even if there are no others, what will the 25% tariff mean in the long term? Now, you take this community here, Arvida. This is a place here that was built 100 years ago, a bit of the cradle of aluminum here in Canada. There are houses here that were built specifically for workers. This community was built from the aluminum industry. And so generation after generation of workers have come from this community. They're looking into the future. There have been issues with the industry in the past. There have been lows, but they're saying this could be devastating if it lasts a long time. If there are more repercussions, what would this mean in this area here? And this is something that they're still watching for very closely. And as I say, as in the rest of Canada, a lot of confusion as to whether this is good news or as though today's announcement comes with a bit of a sigh of relief, if indeed there's a reprieve, but they're still looking at this very closely. And again, they're still dealing with those tariffs here.
We're dealing with the question of reprieve. Okay, Jen, thanks so much. Our coverage of Donald Trump's announcement continues in a moment. You, of course, are watching CTV National News, and we'll be right back.
Pause tariffs. Fight back and defend our jobs.
How the taxing issue is playing out on the campaign trail.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
A taste of what we heard from Donald Trump. And of course, before he spoke, tariffs were already front and center on the Canadian campaign trail. CTV's Abigail Beeman is with the Conservatives. And Abigail, what's Pierre Poilievre's thinking on navigating these tariffs?
Sandy, Pierre Poilievre says he is operating on the understanding that there's only one prime minister at a time, even if he disagrees with Mark Carney.
I've been very careful not to do anything to divide Canada's voice when communicating with the executive branch of the United States government. I'm doing my homework, and I built a plan.
That plan involves immediately renegotiating the new NAFTA and calling for a pause to tariffs on both sides while that happens. Poilievre also talked about red lines during negotiations around Canada's sovereignty and made a commitment to invest any extra revenue from trade with the United States into the military, mentioning hitting the NATO target of 2% of GDP spending. Poilievre had a notable introduction speaking to party faithful over breakfast in downtown Toronto, Ontario Cabinet Minister Caroline Mulroney. She endorsed Poilievre and made many references to her late father, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. The last time Canada had an election with an issue outside our borders dominating the headlines like this was 1988, and original free trade negotiations with the United States, which saw Brian Mulroney win an overwhelming majority.
In 1988, my father explained that Canadian leadership means standing tall, even next to giants like the United States. Just like my dad, Pierre understands this.
For those criticizing a lack of attention to the trade war on the Conservative campaign, it was definitely front and center today. Sandy?
Okay, Abigail, thank you. Now, the NDP was also out championing its plan for how to deal with U.S. tariffs and the effect on Canadian workers. That, of course, was before the latest news of Donald Trump's plan for the day. CTV's Rachel Aiello is with Jagmeet Singh in Winnipeg. And Rachel, what was the leader's message?
Sandy, staying on message with the news of the day, today NDP leader Jagmeet Singh unveiled his cross-sector tariff response plan.
Just build walls, bring them down.
Alongside trade laborers, Singh cemented some of the new details of the top-line tariff messaging he's been campaigning on. The NDP leader said he'd ensure laid-off workers receive more money by raising the income level for which EI premiums are paid and increasing the benefit rate beyond the current 55%. Singh also said if he was Prime Minister, he'd impose a no-trade clause, ensuring rights and services core to the Canadian identity, such as our natural resources, the healthcare system, and women's rights, are non-negotiable in any trade talks with Donald Trump.
He wants us to compromise our values. He wants to compromise in who we are. We will not compromise. We will not back down. We will not give up, and we will win this fight.
The New Democrats are also promising a national building plan to protect unionized jobs.
Appreciate your presence. Honored being here.
Something Singh sought to drive home today by joining striking engineers on a picket line. The NDP campaign is heading back to Ottawa tonight, and when Singh touches down, he's expected to be pressed to address the latest developments from Donald Trump. Sandy?
All right, Rachel, thank you. After the break, uprooting the lumber industry, how the trade war is impacting this critical sector. So many sectors in Canada potentially vulnerable to this ever-expanding trade war. Well, we don't have clarity on anything at this point other than Canada has received a bit of a reprieve. That's what we seem to know. But, you know, we were worried about lumber, and not just for housing, but also for pulp and paper products imported to the U.S. for items like toilet paper. CTV's Sarah Plowman joins us from St. John. And Sarah, New Brunswick is certainly one of the most vulnerable regions in Canada. So a bit of a reprieve at this point, but what was the concern when it came to lumber?
Yeah, Sandy, and I just want to start by saying, you know, I had an interview set up to talk to somebody in the forestry sector about this, and they wanted to postpone it, and they just said they actually want to cancel because they don't know what exactly is going on. And I actually want to also point out that even with what's happening today, if there is a reprieve, there still is an executive order from March 1st for to look into how imports of timber, lumber, and their derivative products impact. Trump had previously said that the over-reliance on other countries' products like this is a threat to its national security. So there's a lot of people in the forestry industry who are still waiting to hear about that as well. And on top of what people were bracing for today, they're also dealing with these duties, which come from a long-standing dispute over softwood lumber. these anti-dumping duties, which had been at 14%, and they're set to be nearly doubled anyway. So the people in this industry are still bracing for other issues, other potential pain to come, and it's a huge sector. In New Brunswick, approximately 24,000 jobs across the Canada. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, Irving had said previously that tariffs, they thought, mentioning 25% tariff, which we see is not happening, but that tariffs would force companies to increase the price of lumber.
Right.
It's more costly for building homes and also toilet paper. Where I am, they make a certain type of pulp that's used and it's necessary for things like toilet paper and paper towel. And Sandy, I also just want to mention that, you know, this was the most tariff-exposed city in the country. And I spoke with the mayor briefly after she watched Mr. Trump said.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, we've run out of time.
No problem, thank you.
I don't want to stop you there, but to your point, the most tariff-affected city in the country. So thanks for that, Sarah. Okay. We're going to take a brief break and a change of pace when we come back. Tributes to the life and legacy of actor Val Kilmer. Tributes are pouring in for Val Kilmer, the actor behind some iconic characters in Hollywood. He has died.
Bamboo to the booty.
Kilmer started out as a stage actor and made his feature debut in 1984 slapstick spy movie, Top Secret.
What's your problem, Kazansky? You're everyone's problem. That's because every time you go up in the air, you're unsafe.
But he found fame after appearing in the original Top Gun as the cool pilot Tom Iceman Kazansky, the rival turned wingman to Maverick, played by Tom Cruise.
If I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher.
The prolific actor experimented with different genres throughout his career, including a dramatic turn as the Doors frontman Jim Morrison.
Who's the better pilot, you or me?
A return to Iceman in the 2022 Top Gun sequel was Kilmer's final on-screen appearance, his voice raspy after struggling with throat cancer for years. His daughter said Kilmer died from pneumonia. He was 65. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us on this historic day that Donald Trump announced sweeping global trade war. At this point, a bit of a reprieve for Canada. We're waiting to see what happens next. Of course, CTV National News will stay on top of the story tonight, tomorrow, as long as necessary. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Goodbye for now. Stay safe.